What's up, Kadivas, and welcome back to another tutorial. My name is Priscilla. I'm a Nigerian women's wear designer based in the UK. This video is for this cord set, which has a palazzo bottom that with an elastic waistband, so the front is smooth and then the back of the trouser is elasticated. It also has some cute pockets on the side and it's just nice, comfy and roomy, such a relaxed fit as well. The top half, on the other hand, is just a piece of scarf that I've cut and I've hemmed around the top and the sides, and this I can tie around my chest like I have here, or around my head if I wanted to wear it a different way and probably just wear the trouser with a cute t-shirt or a bikini top on holiday if I wanted, because if I'm being honest, that's where I'm going to be wearing this piece. Where am I going to in the UK with this top? Tell me, where am I going? To Tesco's or to Sainsbury's or Asda? Now, if you'd like to see how I made the trouser especially, make sure to keep on watching. I shared how to create the sewing patterns, cut and stitch the trouser all together. I also just quickly hemmed the top piece, as you can see here. I say this was about 1/2 meter that I just cut in a triangular shape and then tied around my chest. Like I've worn it like this. I most likely would tie this way, or tie the tie at the back and have the pointy triangular piece on the front. You can really have fun with this style if you wanted. You could also make a different top style if you don't want something revealing as the one I've done here. But basically, I just wanted to make a cord set with this fabric. If you do enjoy this video, do give it a thumbs up. If you recreate this, don't forget to tag me on social media at Kimdave Designs. And let's get into this tutorial, shall we? For this project, I'm going to be working with this fabric here. I have a total of 6 yards. This was one of the fabrics that I got as a gift when I visited Lagos, Nigeria. This I actually got from the only Choma on Instagram. She gifted me this fabric and a very cute boo gown, which you most likely see on my Instagram at some point. Thank you so much, Choma. We ended up creating some amazing content together, had lunch, and it was just so nice to connect with someone who is just as talented. I'll also be using this wide elastic band. The elastic is about 2 inches wide and I only needed a few centimeters to go around the back of the palazzo trouser. But before we get into the main chunk of this video, if you haven't liked already, please do so now. It helps the video reach a wider audience on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe as well. I'm going to be working with the following measurements to create the palazzo pattern. I have them listed on the screen. If you also have a basic trouser pattern, you could work from that if you don't want to make the pattern from scratch like I have done here. I just had to go in, make the trouser pattern and then tweak it to accommodate the elasticated waistband that this style has. Starting off with the front trouser pattern, I'm just going in here to draw a long vertical line. This is going to become the side seam of my trouser. Once I had that drawn in place, the next thing I'm going to be doing here is marking the full trouser length. Mine was really long and it was high-waisted as well, so work with a measurement that you're comfortable with or your client wants. Next up, I'm just going in to square across this top edge. This is going to become my waistline, so I recommend you leave some space around the top so it lets you shape in the waist of your trouser. Next up, I'm marking the vertical distance from my waist to my hip and then my crouch depth. The crouch depth measurement is the measurement that is from your waist to the very point that your butt hits the chair. So you take this measurement sitting down. Next up, I'm just going to square those points across so I have them ready to mark my horizontal measurements. Along my waistline, I'm marking 1/4 of my waist measurement plus 1 inch for my waist dart. And then I'm just going in to mark away the waist dart right in the middle of my waistline. Now, the only fitted part of this trouser is the waistline. Everything else is going to be loose because I'm going to be slashing and spreading this pattern. The dart itself is 4 inches tall and I'm just going in here to draw it in place. After slashing and spreading, we just pleated in the dart into the waistband rather than stitching it down. Along the hip line, I'm marking 1/4 of my hip measurement like so, and along the crouch depth line, I'm marking 1/4 of my hip measurement plus 2.5 inches. That is going to help me draw in the curved edge that shorts and trouser patterns typically have, and it just helps you to actually put on the garment because of how it curves like so. Once I had that drawn in place, I'm just going in here to shape the waistline by lifting it by 1/2 inch upwards on the side and then drawing it downwards to connect with the rest of the waist. I always recommend you measure again after doing this, just to be sure that the waistline is still correct and it still fits. If it's too big, you know you can add. If it's too small, you know you can shape it in through the center front or through the side, but everything was fine. So I'm just going in here to draw the center front edge. Next up, I'm going in here to draw the trouser hemline, which I'm going to be marking a width of 8 inches for now. This will change later on once I have tweaked the pattern. Next thing I'm doing here is I'm marking the vertical distance from the hip to the knee, square that point across. Once I have that in place, I know I can just double check my around thigh and around knee measurement just to be sure that at least this basic pattern fits the way it is. Once I have that checked and I'm okay, I'm just going in to draw the inner seam or inner thigh measurement to complete my front trouser plan. Once that is all done, I'm going in here to divide the front pattern into 2, and that way I'm able to slash and spread my front trouser. You can divide it into more panels if you want, but into 2 will just save me more time, and that way I'm able to add the volume I want through that slash I'm going to be adding. Here I'm just adding a seam allowance around my pattern before going in to find the middle point between the waist and the hip. This measurement and this line will become more important when I'm making my back trouser pattern. Now that I have that in place, my seam allowance added and my grain line and annotations in there, I'm just going in to cut out the front pattern. I always like to add seam allowances before slashing and spreading a pattern, so I know the only thing I'm adding to the pattern is the volume that I'm going to be adding along that spread. Once I have that taped down in place, I don't have to worry about if I added seam allowance before or after. Now that this is all slashed, I am going to be adding some paper underneath the pattern, and I'm spreading it towards the bottom. So the volume is going to be added along the hemline, and I'm spreading it by 7 inches. You can spread yours more. Just be mindful of the width of your fabric because you want to be able to cut this entire pattern on one piece of material. Once I have that spread in place, I'm just taping it down along the extra pattern that I have put underneath, the extra pattern paper correction that I've put underneath, so it becomes one piece with the extra volume that I have added in there. Once that is all done, I'm going to the hemline and I'm drawing in the new curved hemline connecting the 2 panels that I have slashed and spread, so that becomes the new hemline of my front trouser pattern. Thankfully, because I've added the seam allowance, I don't need to think about adding seam allowance at this point. That is already included in this front pattern. With that done, that is your front trouser pattern complete, and this is what it looks like. This would make a really cool palazzo trouser already. If you were going to do like a zip and a waistband, you could just create your back without having to slash and spread it again. But because the back trouser pattern has an elasticated waistband, you want to accommodate for that stretch along the waistline of your back pattern. Now remember that horizontal line we did earlier on, I'm just redrawing it because of the change of the shape from spreading it, and I'm going to be cutting from the center front edge towards the side seam. Don't cut all the way through, just to the very edge, and I'm going to be spreading that by 2 inches for the back trouser. By spreading it like this, you create and add room for your butt and your hip because it's the back of the trouser. Once I have that spread in place, I'm going to get some additional paper and I'm going to be creating my back trouser pattern from this front plan that we have done. Once that is taped down and in place, I'm going in here to draw in the back pattern, which would include the additional spread along that center front part that we have spread to create the back. And I'm just going in here to draw the side. I want to try and get this side as straight as possible, even though it's slightly bent for the front from the spreading we've done along that waist area. I'm accommodating and including the waist dart, and for the crouch I'm dropping it by half an inch and extending it by 1 inch. This way it creates just a little bit of room to fit the thigh, the butt and the hip on the back of the trouser. Now I'm going in here to draw the back crouch. I'm also going to draw in the inner leg or inseam for the back pattern. I'm going to trace off the other parts as well, the sides, the hem, transfer any notches that would help me join this pattern when it's cut onto fabric. So once I have this back pattern created, brothers and sisters, we're going to be slashing and spreading one more time. I know how much you guys enjoy this. I do. I really enjoy slashing and spreading. It's my favorite technique of adding volume to pattern. It can consume time, it can consume fabric, but when it's done correctly, it is so satisfying. Speaking of trousers and palazzo fits, I am working on a new collection which is coming really soon. It is going to be ready at the end of May, beginning of June. This collection was designed in London and made in Nigeria, which you would have seen if you checked out my Nigeria vlogs. I am so excited to show you guys this collection once it's all done, so stay tuned for that. Now that we have our front and back patterns done, I'm going to be going into work a little bit more on the back trouser pattern. And now I'm going to be dividing this into two like we did for the front earlier on, but we're going to be slashing it in the other direction. For the front, we slashed it and added the volume along the hemline. This time we're going to be slashing it from the waistline towards the hemline and adding the volume along the waistline. Now that volume we're adding along the waistline is to accommodate for the elasticated waistband that the back of this palazzo trouser has. Once I have that slashed in place, I'm going to be putting some extra paper underneath so it allows me to add the required volume that I want in there. Now along the waistline, I'm going to be spreading it by 2.5 inches so it does not add too much bulk around the waist and around the hip of the trouser on the back. Once I have that spread in place, I'm just taping down the pattern along the middle portions, and then I'm going to draw in a waistline that connects both sides of the pattern together, so there is one continuous waistline for my back trouser pattern. Once I had that drawn in place, I'm going to cut off the extra paper around this pattern so I have my back trouser pattern ready to be cut onto fabric. Now these are all of the patterns I ended up creating. We have the back trouser, which looks like this. I also went in to create the waistbands for the front and for the back. The waistbands are just rectangular pieces, but there's a difference between the front waistband and the back waistband. To get the entire length of your back waistband, you will need to measure the new waistline of your back trouser pattern and decide on how wide you want it to be. Mine is 6 inches because that is how wide the elastic band is. Now for the front is the waistline minus the dart along the waist. So if you measure your front waistline on your front pattern, you decide on how wide you want it to be, and you want it to be the same width as the back so everything fits. Then you add your seam allowance, you cut it out, and you have your front waistband. The other pattern I'm going to be quickly making is a pocket, an inseam pocket. My pocket is about 6 inches wide, and I love to make inseam pockets because they are super easy to make and quick to stitch. Now the shape of an inseam pocket is like this, so it accommodates your hand once you put your hand into the pocket, and it bags or curves down towards the bottom. Once I've drawn in the shape, added my seam allowance, I'm just going in here to add my grain line and 2 notches that would help me when I'm joining the pocket bags together. For the inseam pocket, you need to cut 2 pairs, a pair to go on the left hand side, another pair to go on the right hand side. I'm going to cut this out to complete all of the sewing patterns that I need. You need your front and back waistband, you need your inseam pocket pattern, you need your front as well as your back main trouser patterns. Now that we have all of the sewing patterns done, we can go ahead to work on cutting the fabric. But if you have watched up until this point, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. The next I'm going to be doing is pinning the pattern onto fabric. I have pinned in all of the patterns, and I'm going in here to cut the main palazzo pants for the front and for the back. I'm also going to go in to cut the waistband, the pockets, and all of the other parts I need to create this trouser. Don't forget to cut your notches because it will make the process of assembly a whole lot quicker and smoother. I have my pocket bag pairs, one for the left and one for the right hand side. I also have my front waistband, which I have fused on the wrong side with some interfacing to give the waistband some structure and stability. I have my back piece, which I left unfused. This is going to house my elastic band. Now that I have all of the pieces cut out in place, it is time to get into sewing. And with sewing, the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be stitching in my pockets. Now the pockets are going to sit along the front and along the back, and it's going to be 2.5 inches below the waistband. So I'm going to put right sides together of one side of a pocket along this edge like so, and then I'm going to do it on the other side, and I'm going to be stitching up those edges of the pocket into that side of the seam. This you need to repeat for the back trouser pieces. So when you've stitched them both together, overlock those edges, you can then go in to sew around the pocket bag. Taking this to my machine, I'm going to be sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance because that's the amount of seam allowance I added on my pattern. Then I'm going to overlock just along the edge where I stitched the pocket into the side seam of the pants. Then I'm going to take this back to my machine and fold it open like this and top stitch the seam allowance against the inside of the pocket bag. This is going to help to keep the pocket on the inside of the seam. Now that I have this done for my front and my back pieces, I am going to join the side seams first. So I am matching complementary edges to each other, and I'm going to be sewing around the side, around the pocket bag, and down the bottom side edges. I'm just going to go in to add some pins just to hold everything in place, and I'm going to be joining the inner and the outer leg. Now the inner leg we're going to be joining like so first, and then the outer leg I'm going to be sewing from the top of the waist around the pocket like so. So you leave your needle in, you lift your footer, and then you sew around the curved pocket edge. Sewing around curved seams can be a bit tricky, and it takes a lot of practice to actually like perfect it, and I make horrible mistakes on some days still, but we live, we learn, and we get better. Now once I have that stitched up for both sides, so the inner and the outer leg, I'm going to take this to my overlocker and overlock all of those seams, press them nice and flat, and this is what they look like. Now I'm going in to join the crouch seam of the left leg to the right leg, and this I'm going to be joining from the front all the way to the back, and I'm just pinning center point to center point, center front to center front, and center back to center back. We're going to be stitching it all the way close because the waistband is elasticated, so there's no need to add any zips, any buttons, or any fastening. Now I'm going to be taking this to my machine, and I'm going to be sewing up that entire crouch seam on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and this I do ever so slowly because I don't want to stitch it in such a way that I lose any measurement. Once I get to the middle point, I continue sewing all the way to the other end, and I'm going to go in to overlock this seam. Once that is all done, I set it aside, and I'm going in to work on the waistband. The waistband I've pinned along the edges like so, putting right sides together, and I'm going to be sewing it up on a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once I have that stitched on both edges, I am going to take this to my iron and press it in half so it looks like this. The waistband is now ready to be fit into the waistline of the trouser, and I'm going to be folding in those darts that we added along the waistline. So this I'm only going to do for the front dart. The back I have included in my waistband, so it's going to be gathered into the waistline as well once the elastic is added. And I'm just going in here to pin a center front of the waistband to the center front of the trouser, side seam to side seam, and if everything was cut correctly, it should actually fit. I found that my front trouser was just a little bit too big for my waistband, so I must not have drawn the front waistband correctly, so just be mindful of that when you do yours. Now I'm going to be sewing the waistband into the waistline of the trouser, leaving a opening in the back for me to put in my elastic and to finish it off. Now I'm going to be sewing this on a 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around, leaving that opening as I mentioned earlier on, and then I'm going to be grabbing my elastic band to fit into the back of the trouser. Now I have my safety pin here that's going to help me to do that, and I'm going to pass the safety pin through one end and then pass it into the back waistband. Doing this like this wasn't enough. I had to go into one edge to cut the seam, and that bottom waistline just open to allow me pull the waistband through on one end. And then once that is passed all the way across, I used some pin just to hold the elastic down inside that back waistband, and then I'm going to be stitching the elastic against the back waistband. So this is somewhere sort of like where the side seam is, and once you stitch the elastic inside that tunnel, it sort of like holds the elastic inside. After doing that, I went ahead to close the hole that we left open, and I'm going in to overlock it just to finish off the waist of the trouser. The final step will be to finish the hemlines of the trouser legs. These I overlocked, and then I went in to fold and to sew them. By overlocking, it just allowed me to just fold one time, but you can fold yours twice. Just accommodate for that in your sewing pattern so you don't lose any dimensions on your trouser length. This is what the finished trouser looks like. I love how roomy and comfortable it is. It sits really high on the waist, so if you don't want yours to be as high as mine, that vertical distance from your waistline to your hip, you can reduce that by 1 or 2 inches if you want it to sit sort of like mid-rise compared to mine. It is a really comfy loose fit, and I love how it sits. The top, as I mentioned earlier on, is just a simple triangular scarf that you can tie sideways like I have done here, or you can tie with the point on the front. You could also make a simple crop top if you don't want to do that, or simply just wear these trousers with a cute t-shirt for the summer. I can't wait to wear this on holiday because I'm going to be on holiday soon, and I know I'll get a lot of wear with this. Imagine a bikini, a sun hat, and sunglasses. Nice. But if you guys enjoyed watching this video, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and until my next video, have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.